Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the University of Michigan Retirees Association podcast. Our podcast offers a fresh way to stay connected with our Retirees Association and the greater University of Michigan community through our many programs delivered by prominent faculty and inspirational community leaders, and by our vibrant interest groups. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the following episode.
Good afternoon. It's my privilege to introduce social psychologist David Dunning, the Mary Ann and Charles Walgreen Jr. Professor of the Study of Human Understanding. He's also a faculty associate at the Institute for Social Research and a professor emeritus at Cornell University, where he taught prior to joining the U of M faculty in 2015. Professor Dunning earned a BA degree from Michigan State and a PhD from Stanford. His most widely cited work proposes that people tend to hold overly flattering opinions of their own competence, character, and prospects, which can't be justified by objective evidence. That's the first time I've ever received a laugh in any public speaking. The tendency to overrate ourselves, in part due to the infamous Dunning-Kruger Effect, has implications for many areas, including health, education, and the workplace. In 2023, Professor Dunning and his colleague Justin Kruger won the prestigious Grawemeyer Award in psychology for their research on cognitive bias. Professor Dunning's work has been featured in the New York Times, National Public Radio, the BBC, This American Life, and the TV show Adam Ruins Everything. His work was also mentioned in a Doonesbury cartoon. Professor Dunning, we are honored to have you with us and look forward to learning more about your research and gaining insights into ourselves and others. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And it appears you might have some belief in what my research has applied numbers to over the years. I'm giving a lecture where people have shown up. It's absolutely great. A couple of things in a few years. I hope to join you, Providence and Michigan Medical willing. And as well, I know there will be questions at the end, but if there are burning questions in the middle, feel free to raise your hands. If there are too many questions during the talk, I reserve the right to tamp things down so I can talk about what I want to talk about. But I also want to find out what you're interested in. I don't believe I know everything that's most important to talk about, so I'm willing to be guided a little bit by what issues interest you. They're probably the issues that should interest me. What I'm interested in is what interests the world. I mean, as we enter, or rather we're solidly in the 21st century, what do people need to know? What do they need to be skillful at? What do they need to navigate? And so I spend a lot of time on the internet or talking to people who do this sort of thing, talking about what are the 21st century skills that you need to know in terms of learning, in terms of literacy, in terms of life. And companies and think tanks are quite willing to list skills. There's some overlap, but not a lot of overlap. And what's interesting about these skills is they tend to be soft skills, would be the terms. That is, they aren't very technical. They're ill-defined tasks is the way that psychologists would talk about them. They're tasks that are obviously important, but there is no answer sheet for them. They're things like collaboration. There's no hard and fast rules in collaboration. There are good ideas. There are certainly courtesies that we should extend. There are norms, but there is no hard and fast set of rules. There are things like creativity. Good luck on the rules on that. There are competencies like literacy, numeracy, knowing science, knowing finance. I sort of like word clouds, but my favorite, though, comes from McKinsey, the consulting firm, because I think they get the list of 21st century skills you need on the head because they list 56. And once you get up to 56, you can't be wrong in some respects. But there are a lot of very complex, essential skills that a person needs to navigate the 21st century because you may have noticed a lot of things are happening rather quickly all the time. The question is, how good are we at navigating them? To what extent do we have the proper skill set? And in particular, the skill set of knowing whether or not we have the proper skill set. Have we identified what we need? Within what we need, do we know what we need to know? Particularly because not only do we need to know these skills, we're really left on our own a lot more, regardless of what age we are. We're left on our own in terms of handling our own finances. We're left on our own in terms of handling our own health. We're left on our own in terms of handling our own retirement, much more, for example, than my parents' generation. And people feel they're up to it. They really do. One of the most favorite doctors out there is Dr. Google. And 80% of people in a survey that was done pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic interrupted a lot of this, I think, very important research, 80% of Americans say they go to Dr. Google to diagnose themselves when they have a complaint. And I have to admit, 100% of me goes to Dr. Google to try to diagnose myself. The issue is, though, that symptom checkers, if you enter symptom checkers into the internet, this is pre-pandemic, are not that accurate. They started out at 51%. By the time the pandemic hit, they were about 85% accurate. But for those who actually went to their doctor, the doctor would disagree with the diagnosis their patient came in with about 20% of the time. We don't know what the figure was for those who decided not to go to their doctors, who decided to stick to their own diagnosis. But new terms came into the language like cyberchondria, which is believing you're sick when you're actually not, because of Dr. Google. Dr. Google was very happy to diagnose you. And I don't know what ChatGPT does or Claude does or any of the chatbots, what they do. I do know that baby boomers, though, are going to places like WebMD and Healthline. Gen Z does so too, but they're also more likely to use places like TikTok and Instagram. And that's where we're going to be moving forward in an era where the mantra is do your own research. And yeah, this is 2 blocks from where I live. I love my neighborhood. I love Ann Arbor. I have nothing to do with this except for taking the picture. But that's where we're at. We are left to our own devices. Many people have the attitude that that's a wonderful thing. I am the expert of myself, after all. That's actually the core of my research. To what extent are we the experts of ourselves? To what extent do we understand ourselves and who we are? What are the issues? What are the problems? What are the strengths we have in that core 21st century skill, because it's always been a skill. The Greeks talked about this way back when in ancient times. Well, if I'm going to start talking about it today, I have to concede one thing, and I have to concede one thing, that the human species is a genius species. It's amazing what our brain can do. In your brain, studies have been done. Let me mention just one study that comes from the Salk Institute down in San Diego that has estimated that you have 1 tetrabyte of information in your brain. It sounds like a lot, but what does that mean? It's the moral equivalent of 4 libraries of Congress of books in your brain. Yeah, that's amazing. And the reason for that is because often in life you're running into situations that are new and require problem solving. You're faced with a situation you've never faced before. So for example, you're at a dock, you have a friend, it's a hot day, the lake is cool, you're wearing your swimsuits, and your friend says, okay, I'm going swimming, it's such a great summer day, and they jump into the lake, And it's then they remember that they don't know how to swim. And they start saying, help me, I don't know how to swim. And so you look for the life preserver on the dock and you realize there is no life preserver on the dock. But you do see a basketball and a bowling ball. Don't ask. You know which one to throw them to help them out. Depending on whether you like them, of course, but you know which one to throw them. That's the core. We can hit mysterious situations, new situations, and we can problem solve. That's the genius of our species. That's what the one tetrabyte does for us. And in fact, let me hit you with one right now. I'm just going to list 6 everyday experiences that people might have or a person might have. And I'm not going to tell you what theme connects them all. I'm just going to have you privately, don't yell out or anything like that. But what theme do you think privately connects them all? That's the key. We'll go through them one at a time. And just note at what number of instances you think, oh, I know what the theme is. Okay, here we go. Struggling with a can opener. Bumping elbows at the dinner table. Hard to find a friendly school desk. Using ill-fitting scissors. Uncomfortable using a spiral notebook. And ink-smudged hand while writing. Now, don't say it, but if you think you know, raise your hand. Now, I'm going to go with the person I saw raise her hand first, and I suspect she knows, and she knows why I suspect she knows.
Where is it? Hold on.
Wait, oh, okay, yep, sorry. We're going to get you a microphone. And
We need to have our YouTube people hear this. So.
yes.
Who raised their hand?
Oh, right in front of you, yes.
It's because of which hand I raised.
Exactly. Which hand did you raise?
My left hand.
You raised your left hand. Yes, I noticed a few people raised their hand. I noticed the majority of people raised their hand were left-handed. This is about being left-handed in a right-handed world. That's what this is about. Why did I use this list? It's because this is something you would recognize. Oh, how many instances did you realize this was about being left-handed? Just what number? The last one. Okay, the last one did it for you. Well, when we ask over the internet left-handers what this list is about 2/3 of them get them by the time they get to the end of the list, and we jungle up the order of everything. Right-handers, only 1/3 of them get it by the end. And the reason I bring this up is we have that tetrabyte of information, but we don't know everything. We live in a bubble of finite information, but what we don't know is infinite. Thank you, Karl Popper, for pointing that out. We know a lot, but our ignorance is infinite. There's a lot of other stuff going on in the world that we don't know about. And we've been doing studies of this. To what extent are people not aware of the lives of others? So, for example, if we present everyday instances of discrimination that Black Americans face, within 2 instances, Black respondents know immediately what we're talking about. It takes 5 instances before white Americans get this as the theme. If we talk about things that women do to protect themselves physically every day, women get it much more quickly than men get it. We know our lives. We don't necessarily know the lives of others. There's a lot that extends outside our experience. And this is just a fact of life, that there's a lot of stuff that lies outside of our knowledge. We know a lot, we don't know everything. How could we know everything? By the time we're 60 years old, if we're an English speaker, we'll know about 48,000 word definitions. 48,000. But the Oxford English Dictionary has over 400,000. And that's before you go to other languages. There are over 100 words outside of English for forms of well-being that don't translate to English. The linguistics class I would love to take is a class that goes through concepts and words that exist in other languages that don't exist in English, like Eilings in French, which is the, I want to get this right, the sudden urge to perform minor and unnecessary destructive acts. Or shoeberryness, I don't know why it's called that, which is in public places sitting down and feeling the heat left by the last person who sat down in that chair. It's a very unpleasant sensation for me. I wish the graduate student had never told me that term. Or my favorite, actually, which is Zonde, a German word, which is the realization that the person I'm passing in the street has just as complex an interior life as I do. I like that. That feels very Germanic to me, and I like that one. But it's about all the unknown unknowns, the things I just don't know that lies outside. The title of the talk is Why People Don't Know They're Incompetent. We don't know what we don't know because it lies outside of what we don't know. We don't even know that we don't know it. That's poetic. It's funny, but it's true. And it matters because in an audit of about 35,000 malpractice cases that was done over the past 20, 30 years that involved diagnosis situations, the most common situation was when a doctor didn't make the wrong diagnosis or was too late in making a diagnosis. It was when they didn't consider a diagnosis. It lay outside of the diagnosis they were considering. It was an unknown unknown. Maybe through neglect, maybe through a lack of training, for example. That's the key. And that's why, as was mentioned, if you take a look at how people view their expertise, we're left with situations like this. And by the way, a lot of my examples are medical, and the reason they're medical is not because of any views I have of doctors. It's because they do the testing. They're very key on testing their students and each other. There are many studies like this. This one has a little bit of an extreme, this has an extreme result, but a telling result. And this was a study done in Sydney, Australia at a teaching hospital where medical interns were being evaluated and they were being put through OSCEs, objectively structured competency exams, where they would either with dummies or with actors go through procedures that they should know how to do by the time they were being evaluated. And these data particularly come from catheterizing a male patient. You can imagine where. And the supervisors, nurses, and doctors had come up with a checklist of what the interns should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, and they had two benchmarks. The student did it so badly they still need supervision, or the student did it so well, not perfect, but they did it so well, we can actually have them start training other people. Those are the two benchmarks. And so all the interns went through the evaluation. They were graded in accordance with the benchmarks and more specifically. And the students were asked the questions of, do you still need supervision and do you think you can teach others? And the ratings of the students for themselves and the instructors were compared. And on the need supervision judgment, 50% of the instructors, when they saw the student, said this person still needs supervision. None of the students felt they still needed supervision. That's the overconfidence, over-flattering thing. And on can teach other, none of the instructors felt the students were ready to teach others, and 80% of the students thought that they could teach other people. By the way, I chose this example because this is right in the middle of all the other examples that come from the paper. It's in the middle. It's representative. So, but that's one study. It's a little extreme, but the easiest finding you can find is people are overconfident. It would be news in a research study if you didn't find overconfidence, and sometimes you don't find overconfidence. And I have argued that overconfidence actually is inevitable. Mathematically, it's inevitable that people be overconfident, logically overconfident in their judgments and decisions. We can talk about that if you want to be. That you have to be on guard about it because mathematically, logically, we're going to be overconfident. Don't worry about ego. Set ego aside. We're all going to be overconfident. What matters is who exactly is going to be overconfident. And this also is a logical thing. Staying in the medical realm. This is a study that was done down at the University of Florida in Gainesville and Jacksonville. And this was done over a decade, where about 1,100 residents going through an OBGYN rotation, they called it a clerkship, had just finished their final exam on the clerkship and were being graded and about to find out their grades. Everything was done, about to find out their grades on the clerkship and on the final exam, but were asked to guess what grades they thought they were going to get. And basically what their instructors did is in 2003, when they published this, they tracked perception versus reality. That is, they tracked according to, and this is at the bottom, what the student actually got on the clerkship from F to A versus what the student perceived they were going to get from F to A. In terms of their perceived final exam grade using the National Standardized Exam and what grade they were going to get on the clerkship. And if you take, the purple line is reality. If they were perfectly calibrated, that's what they would get. And the reason they did that is, well, Justin and I had published our work in 1999, and they said, we've got the data, let's take a look. What they found is, well, students on the top getting A's underrated themselves on average a little bit. Students failing the exam didn't seem to have much insight that they were failing the exam. They're getting F's and D's. They thought they were going to get B's and B minuses. They didn't think they were going to do as well as students at the top, but they thought they were going to do pretty well. And students doing poorly on their overall grade were overestimating their overall grade as well. That's the incompetent people don't have insight that they're incompetent. We would argue more strongly, you can't expect incompetent people you can't expect them to know that they're incompetent. If they knew they were incompetent, they would work harder to get competent. The other way I would say it is people who are not expert do not have the expertise to realize just how much expertise they lack. That came to be known as the Dunning-Kruger Effect, that gap at the bottom. Justin and I did not name it the Dunning-Kruger Effect. I want to make that clear. It just got named for us. I've asked ChatGPT who named it the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And ChatGPT tells me I named it the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And I explained to ChatGPT I did not name it the Dunning-Kruger Effect, or why would I be the one asking it? And it apologizes very courteously. ChatGPT is always very courteous. I desperately want to know who did this to Justin's and my good family name, because after we're gone, our names are going to be associated with incompetence, ignorance, nincompoopery, crankness, naivete, being misguided. In some sense, it's great. It's the best career move I never made, but we didn't name it that. But that is the gap that we've become known for, is that people don't know that they don't know. We actually made a stronger statement that in many areas of life, not all, but in many areas of life, the logic suggests you cannot know what you don't know. You're going to do what you think is the most reasonable thing. And you're going to be pretty confident in it because it seems reasonable. That's the logic that leads to overconfidence. You don't even need ego. But you won't know that that's a mistake. Now, mind you, there are times when you do know that you don't know. Like, how long is the longest river in Asia? Yeah, I think you kind of go, yeah. Don't look. Sorry. Right now, if you were a bunch of undergraduates, everybody would be on their phone right now. And I would have been too slow. Or what is the name of the river in which Bonn is located? Most Americans kind of go, Bonn? I've been to Bonn many times. That's why it's my favorite question. But in any event, so, there are times you know you don't know. That's not you know. And that's be contrasted though with genius times when well, no, I don't know, but I can get to the answer. Like which is the season in the United States where the Earth is closest to the sun, and you can get yourself to the answer. Or which of the following best describes Africa's location? You can get yourself to the answer. That's pretty simple. That gets back to the genius of the 1 tetrabyte of information, the 4 libraries of Congress we have in our head. Let me continue with that, though, and let me lean a little bit too much on this person who, and what he did with his 1 tetrabyte. Sometimes our 1 tetrabyte we rely on it. There's a reason why we have it, because we face a lot of new situations, and there's a reason we're one of only 2 species that you can find around the globe. There's only 1 other species, a little mite, that makes it all the way around the globe. But it can lead us to disasters. This is right before Hurricane Irma in 2017, Category 5. It was unclear where exactly it was going to hit. When it was veering toward the southern United States. This is in Miami Beach, and a Fox newscaster went and interviewed someone who was in Miami Beach.
Let us ask you a question. What do you think about the storm, the risk to your own safety at this point?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
What do you think about the storm, the power, the ferocity, and the risk to your own safety at this point?
Well, at this point, I'm very relieved to discover that as we speak, the eye of the storm is practically due south of us by 220 miles, okay, because it's crossing the 80th meridian, which is 80 degrees west longitude. So I'm not so worried because it's so far away, and it's bearing as of 8 p.m.
Westbound.
Well, not just westbound, it was 275 degrees. That's only 1/15 above due west toward true north.
Right.
So this thing is moving and has been moving in a very westerly direction, and because it's several hundred miles south, the risks are less and less. I'm not worried. I don't think it's going to get much worse than what we're seeing right here.
Thanks.
Yeah, 12 hours later, it hit a direct hit onto Miami Beach. The genius is part of what makes us such a successful species, but when it goes wrong, it can go wrong. It can lead us to very overconfident answers, if you will, that turn out to be misleading answers. Getting back to those questions, the sun is close. The Earth is closest to the sun in winter. Most Americans get that wrong. Most people are drawn to the summer. Just the logic is there. Africa lies mostly in the northern hemisphere, not the southern hemisphere, but most Americans will gravitate toward that because that's where our knowledge takes us. We worry about AI agents and the issue of hallucination. That AI is a very courteous and a very generous piece of technology. It'll give us answers, but it'll give us answers that are just made up. I once asked ChatGPT to give me a route to travel from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Kashmir, Oregon. And not only gave me one, it gave me 2 different routes, 2 alternatives. The problem is there is no Kashmir, Oregon. It hallucinates. But somehow in a lot of garment rending about hallucination with AI agents, with chatbots, people have forgotten or ignored or neglected that as humans, we also hallucinate quite a bit. It's a good thing, or we wouldn't have movies or literature or opera or anything. But it also leads to this Dunning-Kruger effect. That is, if you take questions like I presented to you where you look at it, you don't know the answer. You don't know the longest river in Asia. The Yellow River is 3,915 miles long. You don't have any information that's going to get you there. You're pretty calibrated, that's the blue line, between how confident you are and how likely it is that you have the right answer. Oh, this is ongoing data. I'm showing you data more in its more natural state. The red line is more like where does Africa lie? There you have some information that can get you to an answer. And it might be the right answer, it might be the wrong answer. That's where people who are going to get it wrong can be much more confident, often just as confident as people who are going to get it right. And this matters because we do have information. We want information. We want our experts to have information. It's absolutely essential. The issue is that sometimes we are at the edge. We are in a situation that is brand new, like 2020 when COVID-19 hit. And not only were we biologically naive, we were intellectually naive. This was a brand new virus. How should we respond? What protections should we take? What should we tell people to do? And experts, rationally, they had to move quick. They knew they were going to have to change what they said, but they had to move quick. And the models they had in their head, some of the things they said were useful, like we should isolate, but some things, some suggestions actually turned out to be superfluous or wrong. No fault, just the model in the head was the wrong model. It was a flu model, not a coronavirus model. And looking back on early days, when people were writing the public health officials were writing retrospective accounts of the coronavirus, they mentioned that this turned out to be the one thing that they talk about. They had a flu model in their head, and that led to some wrong recommendations. We have to protect kids, they're going to be the most vulnerable. Turned out to be not to be true. We just have to hold on to April. When it gets warm, it'll go away. Turned out not to be true. We have to wipe down surfaces. That's how flu viruses spread. Turned out not to be true. No fault. That's just the way that it goes. And it can lead to other situations more recently.
Right, you see that? That's an airline. Commercial airline.
I can read that.
There you go.
The reason being, over the holidays in New Jersey, all of a sudden there were all these mysterious drones over New Jersey. And people started going, oh, this might be foreign actors, or this might be aliens, or this might be nefarious agents. Those are theories that come to mind. People weren't considering things like the drones were always there to begin with, but you don't notice them until people start talking about drones. I didn't notice that chairs in Detroit Metro Airport are hot until someone told me about a concept of Schuberiness. Now it's, or, yeah, when people say, there are all these mysterious drones up there, you know what happens? People take out their drones and put their drones in the air to look for drones. There are a lot of other explanations, but those are unknown unknowns, but people have other theories in their head. That's what can happen. Let me stop there and see if there are any quick questions, because I want to use the last bit of time actually to talk a little bit about whatever the group is interested in. I basically what I did is I brought the slide deck that has everything in it, and I'm very happy that the slide deck hasn't broken down because it's groaning, let me tell you. But I want to see if people have any specific questions, because I can talk about how do you deal with misinformation. Talk about that a little bit, but people might have other considerations as well.
We have one here, and I think there's one over there.
Okay, yes.
This may sound like a silly question, but is there such a thing as media incompetence? Like, I'm always being told that, well, you just depends on what you're reading.
There is such a thing as media incompetence, both in terms of the media and also in terms of receiving the media, if you will. That is one of the skills that we desperately need to develop as citizens is media literacy. Actually, let me jump ahead to something because this actually would be good to discuss. People often ask, what should we do to deal with misinformation coming from the media? Because, by the way, the media is not just one thing, it's a lot of different things. And as a person who's been interviewed a lot by a lot of different medias, media competence ranges quite a bit. So if I'm being interviewed by a local newspaper versus a network or a regional newspaper, it's going to be a different experience. I have to rack up a different set of considerations in my head. I'm going to be really impressed by a national person. They're going to be smarter than me. Local media person is going to want something that's funny. I know that's what's going to happen. But there is a lot of misinformation out there. Oh, in fact, the other thing that's happening, and I would include just a lot of places you can get information out there. Let's see if I can find it. Where is it? Oh, shoot. I can't find it. There was a slide I was going to show you that I actually showed my psychology and law class the other day because we were talking about AI, the use of AI now in the law. And one of the problems we're going to develop with AI is that bad faith actors have realized that AI just trains itself on text. So bad faith actors are just going to flood text in the world. Like some nations. You can imagine who the nations are. They're going to bias what AI learns, and that's what it'll report. So you have to really watch out. And the reason I bring that up is if you're going to be dealing with media, and media can come from everywhere, let me get to what do you want to be? Sorry, I've lost myself. I'm going to find myself here. Sooner or later, I went too far. Is I have a lot of things that you want to be. And one of the things that you want to be is you want to be Finnish. Now, what do I mean by that? Finland has been at war for nearly 100 years against misinformation. Ever since the Winter War in 1929, 1930, they've been at war with Russia. Russia has been flooding them with misinformation for 90 years. And so Finland has arranged its educational system from preschool to adult education to train people how to be media savvy. So they really key in on critical thinking skills, that's number one, but also things that are specific to how do you spot misinformation. You're starting to see it in some school systems in the United States too. And on my computer, I have all some of the manuals that they use in Finland for this type of training. Unfortunately, it's in Finnish and I don't know what they say, but I have them. Someday, I'll have a translation software and I'll take a look. But the key is that when you see something in the media, you do want to do what the Finns do, and what you want to be is you want to be a competent fact checker. And what does that mean? Often what people do intuitively is they kind of go and ask, is this a high quality publication? Is this a high quality journalist? Is this a high quality source? No, that's vertical reasoning. You're looking at one source. Don't want to look at just one source. You want to look at you want to do lateral reading and start thinking about multiple sources. So if you see something that's surprising, something that's provocative, you want to find out about what other sources are saying, about the claim that you're reading, what they're saying about the source that you're reading. Is it trustworthy? And also, what is the origin of the claim that you're reading? In school systems, they're now teaching kids, if you see a surprising photograph, do a Google search to make sure that photograph is actually of the thing they claim it is, or is it really from somewhere else? Because often you see a provocative photograph, but actually it's from 1965. It just didn't happen in, X state, for example. So, for example, here's a claim. Gary Sinise says he hated working with Tom Hanks. He made my skin crawl. Should you believe it? I would say not. You really can't tell why you shouldn't. I wouldn't believe this source. This actually comes from a source called the Dunning-Kruger Times. We have nothing to do with it. But there are politicians who will retweet headlines from the Dunning-Kruger Times. Governors, senators have been caught retweeting headlines from the Dunning-Kruger Times. Follow the source. You need to know these flowers weren't discovered near Fukushima nuclear power plant. They're actually just some common everyday flowers from somewhere else. You have to become a fact checker. And that's one thing you can do. So there is media incompetence. One thing that we have to do is become a little bit more media savvy. And that starts with all of us. And there are some places that are starting with Gen Z or Gen Alpha with this. So it's a good question. Wait, we need the microphone.
Do you find the overconfidence factor is different between men and women?
Yes, but it depends. It depends on the task that you're talking about. Because a lot of the overconfidence comes from what preconceived notions people have about themselves. So if it's a male-identified skill or area, football, men are going to be just much more overconfident. And if it's female-identified, women are going to be more overconfident than men. So a lot of things that are valued in society, business, science, tend to be more male-identified. So you see a lot more male overconfidence. But it really depends on what's the task you're talking about. Because a lot of overconfidence also comes from these preconceived notions people have about themselves. So if a person thinks they're really good at X, logical reasoning, finance, whatever, they're going to show as overconfident. We've shown that. And if they don't think they're very good, they're going to show up as underconfident. We've shown that as well. Even if you've got person A and person B, overconfident, underconfident, doing exactly the same, showing the exact same skill, their perceptions are really going to diverge. We've shown that a number of times.
Question back here.
Oh, yeah.
The Finnish example aside, what are your recommendations to overcome the natural incompetence that I have?
Okay, well, I have a slide for that. I'll just go with, what's interesting, I made the claim that overconfidence is inevitable. And it's not a surprise if you look at the professions. Best practices, if you take a look, seem to be exactly designed to overcome overconfidence and the error that comes with it. So if you look at doctors, when doctors make diagnoses, they don't diagnose a disease or a malady. They do differential diagnoses. They not only diagnose a disease or problem they consider alternatives and do tests to rule alternatives out. That's key. Consider alternatives. That psychological research says that's critical. And that's really worked in my life. I once came into a walk-in clinic with all the classic signs of Lyme disease. I moved here from upstate New York, and it turned out to be gout. But the doctor tested alternatives. Lawyers, in the American system, you have this side and that side, and they argue it. and someone in the middle has to look at both sides. Argue this side, argue its opposite. Be opposing attorneys with yourself. Argue this side, argue that side. Consider the opposite. Psychological research absolutely agrees. You got to do that. Be a scientist. I won't go through it, but I don't support my theories. When I have a theory, I design an experiment to assassinate it. I try to disconfirm my theories. And if my theories survive, I honor it by trying to publish it. That's falsifiability. Be an aviator. Have a checklist. Don't assume you're going to fly right. You've got a checklist that you have to do. And here's another critical one. I'll just go through, which is, this is ongoing work that we have. This is just a quick study on it. This comes from University of Michigan. We're giving students, or in this study, we gave students a logical reasoning test. They see a series of questions like this, and they have to answer these logical reasoning tests and say how confident they are that they got it right. And then what we do is see how confident they are when they're right, accurate, versus wrong in their answers. And they're more confident in their answers when they're right versus wrong, but they're still plenty confident when they're wrong. They're almost 65% confident. They think by the way, on average, they're right about 2 out of every 3 times. But when they're dead wrong, they're about 65% confident. No, I got that one right. Now, each person is also judging the answers given by someone else in the experiment. That's key. This is how they're rating the other person's test. Yeah, you see, the ones the other person got right, they're almost as confident in their answers. The ones the other person got wrong, they're showing appropriate doubt. Have someone else check your thinking. That may work. Your errors may be more visible to them than they are to you. There are a number of things you can do beyond being Finnish that might, I wouldn't do this all the time, it's exhausting, but when it counts, that's a start of the types of things you can do. Be a lawyer, be a doctor, be a collective, for example.
Yeah, so in this example, once I've been proven to be inaccurate, does that alter my future evaluation of my answers? In other words, will I be more likely to recognize myself as being wrong? Does that inform the future performance?
In the main, the answer is yes, but. So far, I've mentioned we've been talking about things and ego hasn't been involved. Whether you change your mind about yourself, that's where ego starts getting involved. Do you take the feedback or not? And people who are willing to take the feedback, they don't get defensive. They can change their mind or work harder to improve. People who are defensive or have an ego, they're more likely to stay where they are, both in terms of performance level, but also mistaken ideas of where their performance is. So ego doesn't get you to the types of things I've been talking about, but it may keep you there. That's where that matters.
Other questions?
My question is, you said you work with a lot of the medical arena because the data's there. Is there data shown in the non-medical arena? Because I'm thinking residents, they're already at a different place in confidence because they got to med school. So is the non-medical arena showing the same type of information?
Yes, that is. the types of effects that I'm talking about have been shown everywhere. For example, we've done work with people who are at a trap and skeet shooting contest, and we give them a quiz that the NRA has designed about firearm care and safety. And they show the same effects. We didn't do, actually what we want and get is other people doing the same sort of studies. And this is a nationally representative sample of people who are looking at headlines that are either real or fake. And they're being asked, can you tell the real ones from the fake ones? And as you can see, there's very little correlation between their performance of being able to tell the real ones from the fake ones and what they think their performance is. So the two different studies. This is reality and their ability to tell real from fake, and this is, everybody seems to think they're pretty good at it, essentially. And what's key is the more overconfident people are in their ability to tell real from fake, the more they say they would, this is a headline they would pass along, for example, and when it's fake. So it's been done with chess players, for example, bridge players. It's been hospital technicians, to go back to medicine. It's been done by a lot of different people. Aviation students recently, for example. The big example. I just saw this morning. I actually was going to finish the talk with this. The latest group to show Dunning-Kruger are chatbots. There are a number of studies in AI looking to see if chatbots show overconfidence in Dunning-Kruger. This is the latest one, literally this morning, and the reason I'm showing it to you is it's this morning and it has the best graphics because it was done at a journalism school. But these are journalism researchers who take quotes from different publishers and ask different chatbots to find these quotes and come back with the publisher, the headline of the story, and the URL of the story. 3 pieces of information. And the green are the times that the chatbots came back with the right answers or partial answers. And the reds are wrong answers. They are answers, but they're wrong. The things above the bar is where the chatbot said, here's the answer. The things below the bar is where the chatbot said, this might be the answer. This appears to be the answer. The chatbot at least showed a hedge, low confidence. And as you can see, the chatbots were very enthusiastic about showing answers and showing answers, well, that turned out to be wrong. This is not the only AI illustration of this. And what was the wrinkle that I thought was interesting is if you go to the service, the version of a service that you have to pay for as opposed to a free service, pay for versus free service, it exacerbates the problem. But the problem with ChatGPT is, except for Claude 2, they all show the Dunning-Kruger effect. So, yeah. I go to medicine because they do the best research, quite frankly. They do the most precise research. We've looked at a lot of different tasks in a lot of different arenas, but the real thing is other people have done the same thing. Now, I should mention there is a small cadre of people who like to complain that our research is nothing but a statistical artifact. And my response, I'll just be very quick on this, is that those individuals tend to focus on the first 2 studies we did in 1999 and ignore the 25 years since. So they're acting as though they don't know the 25 years of the research, and they ignore all the research that has been done on the artifact they claim the research is. And all that ignorance is ironic given what the phenomenon is that they're studying. But I haven't published that paper yet. But there, I do have to divulge that there are people who say this is nothing but a statistical artifact. But no, they haven't looked at the literature. But I do have to admit that.
I have one question back here.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this came up in I heard you say when you were talking about the Finnish
Yeah.
people, you said start with Gen Alpha. And I might have missed what that was, but I don't have any idea what that is.
Oh, that's Generation Alpha, excuse me. That is, I'm a boomer, baby boomer. And currently the generation, if you do the categorization of generations, I am teaching Generation Z. About a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to an undergraduate and I realized that all the students I'm teaching in my psychology and law class currently, none of them were born before 9/11. It's a historical event for them. They didn't live through the experience. That's Gen Z. Wait, that might even be Gen Alpha. Oh, that's Gen Alpha. Well, anybody born, I'm trying to remember who's who, but the people who are currently, I believe, in elementary school are Generation Alpha. They're after Gen Z, though I might have my ears wrong. But that's what Gen Alpha is. But there are several generations in play now.
Another question?
Is this phenomenon human or is it cultural?
Good question. It is human. I think it's part of the human condition. That essentially we live in an environment, and the environment is there's just a lot of stuff in the world, and we are finite beings, and we can't know everything. And it's impossible to have perfect information. Not even the computer has perfect information. How can we expect us to have perfect information? So that's just part of the environment that we live in. It's part of the human condition. Are there cultural differences? According to the theory, as Justin and I talk about it, there shouldn't be, because it's part of the fact that what we don't know is invisible to us. Because if you don't know something, often you are not in a position to know that you don't know it. And that should be true whatever culture you're in. Now, that being said, we're looking at it, and there are cultural differences among 8th graders globally when students perform poorly in math and science, whether or not they express knowledge that they're performing poorly in math and science. And there are 2 factors that come into play. One is that their teachers are very willing to tell them they're performing poorly in math and science. There are some cultures where it is rather public. There are other cultures where teachers will not say. So the outside world is either telling you how well or how poorly you're performing, or it's not, number one. Number 2, in the countries where poor performers know they're performing poorly, on average, those countries, students are performing overall really well. And we would argue that poor performers in those countries actually have reached a level where they can start to have insight into the fact that everybody else is doing better than they are. The other countries, people overall, or students overall, are performing poorly, and so people who are performing the poorest aren't in a self-awareness situation. And that checks out statistically. So the core mechanism of what's going on, the core process of what's going on shouldn't produce a cultural difference, but the culture itself can produce a difference based on what the teacher is doing and based on the student's performance overall. That's a very good question, and are we going through a lot of data from about 138 cultural samples. Yeah, well, but it's all there. It's right there. I mean, it's amazing what you can do in the modern age. It's on that computer. It doesn't complain.
And one final question here.
Sure.
You're mentioning these alphas and the other groups got me thinking, we hear that as we get older, we have more wisdom. Do we get any smarter in looking at these issues? Are there significant age differences and so on?
I was thinking about that. We haven't looked, and we should. And I think we should, because there is a distinction in psychology between fluid skill and crystallized skill. And fluid skill is being able to figure things out. Crystallized skill is just having the knowledge, knowing knowing what button to push and where on the menu you construct the PowerPoint slide, for example. That's crystallized. Fluid is figuring out, okay, I have a new problem I've never dealt with before. How do I figure it out? In psychology, fluid intelligence will begin to fade, but crystallized knowledge increases. And there are some areas in life where crystallized knowledge is key, especially about specific fields. Other places, fluid knowledge is more key. So I think it depends on what you're talking about. But one of the things that we keep telling students is that they shouldn't assume they're at their best or they know everything yet. And that if they want to know how to handle a situation, they really should adhere to the old Chinese proverb, which is, if you want to know the road ahead, talk to someone who's walking back from it. So I don't know if we're any better or not, but people should be asking us the questions, is what I think. Because what I tell the graduate students is often I say, look, I'm not older, I'm just your future. That's how you should think about it. And I truly think that's the way. And I look forward to my future if it includes so many people like you. So thank you very much for the day.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this latest episode by the University of Michigan Retirees Association. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to learn more about us, visit us on the web at umra.hr.umich.edu and subscribe to this podcast. Thank you again, see you next time, and always, go blue.